What if everything you thought you understood about this story was carefully constructed to feel simple? What if the version that spread across the internet, the one with a clear villain and a clear victim, was never the full picture, but just the easiest one to believe? Because back in 2013, when this story first broke, it didn't just shake a relationship, it shook perception itself. And for weeks, it felt settled. People had already decided what happened. They had already chosen sides. The narrative moved fast, locked in even faster, and just like that, it felt finished. But what if the moment that seemed like closure was actually the beginning of something much harder to untangle? At first, everything followed a pattern we've seen before. A relationship breaks down, details leak out, and the public fills in the blanks. Teddy Campbell was framed as the one who made the mistake, the one who crossed the line. Tina Campbell stood in the spotlight as the one who was hurt, the one holding everything together while everything around her collapsed. It was a clean narrative, easy to follow, easy to believe, and maybe that's why it spread so quickly, because it didn't require questions. It gave people answers right away. But simple stories often come at a cost. They leave things out, they smooth over complications, and they create a version of reality that feels complete, even when it isn't. So for a while, no one looked deeper. No one really needed to, until he spoke. When Teddy finally addressed everything, he didn't do what most people expected. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to erase what had already been said. Instead, he did something far more strategic. He admitted it. He owned the cheating. And for a brief moment, that seemed to confirm everything people already believed. It reinforced the narrative instead of breaking it. But then, just when it felt like the story had reached its final form, he added a single line that changed how everything was interpreted. I wasn't the only one. And that was the moment the narrative stopped moving forward and started turning inside out. Because now this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It wasn't just about a mistake inside a marriage. It became about what he was suggesting had been happening underneath everything people thought they saw. According to him, allegedly, this wasn't a relationship built on love anymore. It had shifted into something else entirely, something shaped by pressure, by expectations, by maintaining an image that mattered more than the reality behind it. He described a dynamic that didn't break overnight, but slowly evolved over time, a relationship where decisions stopped being emotional and started becoming strategic, where connection faded quietly while control became more visible. And the way he framed it didn't sound like an excuse, it sounded like context. That's what made people pause, because now the question wasn't just what he did, it was what he claims was happening at the same time. And just as people began processing that shift, another layer entered the conversation. Another name started appearing, not in direct accusations, not in clear statements, but in a way that felt intentional enough to matter. Warren Campbell. The mention wasn't loud, but it didn't disappear either. It lingered just enough to raise questions. Because when a story introduces a new variable without fully explaining it, it changes how everything else is viewed. Suddenly, this didn't feel like a two-person situation anymore. It felt like something more complex, more interconnected, more difficult to define. And even without confirmation, the implication alone was enough to shift the tone of the entire conversation, because now people weren't just analyzing actions, they were analyzing relationships, patterns, and possibilities. Once that shift happened, everything that came before it started to look different. Old interviews resurfaced, clips that once felt normal began to feel loaded. Moments that passed without question years ago were now being re-examined with a completely different mindset. And when people start looking backward with new information, even if it's incomplete, they begin to connect dots that weren't visible before. Patterns started forming, not confirmed patterns, not proven ones, but patterns that felt convincing enough to keep the conversation going. Because what Teddy was suggesting was that things didn't change suddenly. It was that things had been changing quietly for a long time, that the breakdown people saw publicly was just the final stage of something that had already been unfolding behind the scenes. And if that's even partially true, then it challenges the timeline everyone believed in. Then comes the part that complicates everything even further: money. Because once financial dynamics enter a relationship, they shift the balance in ways that aren't always visible from the outside. Teddy allegedly suggested that control wasn't just emotional, it was tied to influence, to access, to decisions that went beyond the relationship itself. And whether that perception is accurate or not, it introduces a level of tension that changes how people interpret everything else. Because now this isn't just about feelings, it's about power. It's about who had it, who felt it shifting, and how that shift may have affected everything that followed. And when you combine emotional strain with financial tension, the situation becomes more than complicated. It becomes layered in a way that's difficult to fully unpack. At this point, the story stops being linear. It stops moving from beginning to end. Instead, it splits. Two narratives begin to exist at the same time, one that people believed first, and one that's now being introduced piece by piece. And both feel real in different ways. Both contain elements that make sense, but neither feels complete. And that's where things start to escalate, because when there's no clear resolution, the audience steps in to fill the gaps. People start choosing sides, not based on confirmed facts, but on what feels more believable. Clips get shared, statements get repeated, and certain phrases begin to take on more weight than they originally had. Over time, repetition starts to feel like confirmation. And once that happens, the story no longer belongs to the people involved, it belongs to the public. As more people weigh in, the situation grows louder, more fragmented, and harder to control. New interpretations emerge, old details get reframed, and every silence from either side starts to feel intentional, like it's hiding something rather than simply withholding it. That's what makes this stage so unstable, because the less clarity there is, the more room there is for speculation. And speculation doesn't slow things down, it accelerates them. It pushes the story further away from what can be confirmed and deeper into what can be imagined. And once that shift happens, it becomes almost impossible to bring the narrative back to something grounded. So, now, everything leads back to a single question. Not who made the first mistake, not who said what, but something much more difficult to answer. If what we're hearing now is only what each side is willing to reveal, then what are they both choosing to leave out? Because incomplete truths don't resolve stories. They extend them. They keep them moving, keep them evolving, keep them just uncertain enough to stay relevant. And maybe that's why this still feels unresolved, because what we're watching isn't clarity, it's fragmentation. Two sides speaking but not fully, two narratives existing but not aligning, and an audience trying to make sense of something that may never come together cleanly. Because when the full story finally surfaces, and it usually does, it doesn't always simplify things. Sometimes it does the opposite. Sometimes it reveals just how much was hidden from the beginning. And if that happens here, then this was never just a breakup story. It was something far more complex, something built on layers that were never meant to be seen all at once. And the real question is, when those layers finally come into focus, who will still be standing when they do?